You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly. You have successfully joined the webcast. Please stand by. The meeting will begin shortly.
Good morning. My name is Bob Duffy, and as chair, I now call to order the meeting of the directors of the Erie County Stadium Corporation for Monday, March 11th, 2024. I'd like to note for the record that this meeting is being webcast. We welcome public comments on today's agenda items. I will note for the record that the public was given the opportunity to comment on the agenda items by submitting their written comments by 9 a.m. today. I'd like to state for the record that no comments were received from the public concerning today's agenda items. I'll also note that we do not have members of the public attending today. Directors have received the relevant written materials in advance of today's meeting and are free to ask questions at any time. Before we begin with the substantive portion of the meeting, I would like to ask the directors whether anyone has any potential conflict of interest with respect to any of the agenda items today. If so, I'd like you to please make the appropriate disclosure on the record at this time. We'll make sure that you may recuse yourself at any time from any discussion or vote regarding that item. So stop for a moment. No conflicts. Okay, hearing none. Our first order of business is going to be the approval of the minutes of the directors meeting of March 15th, 2023. You should have had those before the pre-read. And once you had a chance to read, take any questions or comments and then ask for a motion. What's your motion? Second? Any questions, comments? All in favor, say aye. 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 Any opposed? Carries. Thank you. That motion carries. I would now like to ask Steve Rinelli, the corporation's.
So let me just go through the board,
Okay.
or through the fiscal year budgets, just make sure everybody's on the same page before we vote. We don't mind backing up. Okay, thanks. Sure. New York State finance law requires that prior to the commencement on April 1st of each new fiscal year, the directors of the stadium corporation shall adopt an annual operating budget and a capital budget. Again, these are attached for your review at the back of the board materials. Funds for both of these budgets will be administered by New York State Urban Development Corporation, doing business as Empire State Development Corporation, pursuant to a memorandum of understanding entered into between the parent and subsidiary. So for our operating budget this coming fiscal year, we propose a total of just over $645,000 in personal services. This would be salaries and benefits for the employees of the corporation, as well as a total of nearly $2 million in non-personal services. Again, this is going to primarily be our consultant and legal fees. So the total of the budgeted personal and non-personal expenses for fiscal year 24-25, the operating budget is $2,629,406. On the capital side, again, this is a separate capital budget, separate from operating. And the sole capital project being funded by the corporation, of course, is the design and construction of a new stadium for the Buffalo Bills. The corporation's fiscal year 2024-2025. Welcome, Chairwoman. Good to see you for you right here. Good to see you. Be a second sit down. We're just going through the first item on the fiscal budget.
Thank you.
So again, the capital budget for this upcoming fiscal year is $250 million, which is sort of the second portion of the overall $600 million that the corporation will be contributing to the project. Based upon the foregoing, The directors are requested to ratify and approve the corporation's proposed fiscal year 2024-2025 operating budget in the amount of $2,629,406 and the capital budget in the amount of $250 million. Authorize the corporation to enter into memorandum of understanding with ESD to administer the funds and to take all related actions.
All set. Thanks, Steve. Any comments or questions? As earlier stated, no comments or questions from the public. So with that, I would entertain a motion. A second. Second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Carries. Thanks, Steve. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, Steve will present the authorization to adopt the corporation's revised procurement guidelines. Steve.
Great. Thanks again, Bob. So the second item here, the guidelines for the use, awarding, monitoring, and reporting of procurement contracts as mandated by are designed to govern procurements by Empire State Development and its subsidiaries, such as our Erie County Stadium Corporation. This is an annual ongoing, procurement contracts. This is not something that the group has done to date, or at least some time. So I do note here, there's really no substantive changes to executive orders and discretion to authorities in the past year that would require modifications to the 2023 guidelines. But to be clear, you haven't seen those yet. There were some internal staff recommendations to clarify procedures for setting up participation goals when it relates to minority and women-owned businesses, as well as service-disabled, veteran-owned businesses, just to make some of the sections more readily understood, easier to be used by staff, frankly, consolidating different provisions, as well as sort of just updating the overall document, adding section numbering, things like that to ensure that the guidelines are consistent, user-friendly, and accessible. So accordingly, the proposed 2024 guidelines, which are attached here, have been revised to incorporate these revisions, as well as the changes required for consistency. And today we ask for your approval of the attached guidelines. Later this month, the ESD Board of Directors are anticipated to adopt these proposed 2024 guidelines. And typically that is then to be followed by the subsidiaries. The new guidelines will become effective as of April 1st, 2024, and the Stadium Corporation desires to have the new guidelines adopted on or before that effective date. Accordingly, the directors are being asked to conditionally approve the 2024 guidelines, subject to approval by the Empire State Development Board of Approval, anticipated on March 28th of this year. Guidelines define the universe of procurement transactions which are subject to policies and procedures. Generally, all procurements by the corporation must be competitive, except where state law provides for non-competitive sourcing. The guidelines explain the various means of obtaining goods and services in an open, accountable, and transparent manner, including incorporation of the corporation's bid opening guidelines, and a compilation of the procurement record for every covered procurement contract. The guidelines comply with the applicable provisions of the Public Authorities Law, the State Finance Law, and the State Tax Law, and they are consistent with the State Procurement Council's guidelines and with the Governor's directive that all state agencies and public authorities make responsible spending decisions and that they be accountable for sufficient monitoring of their spending to ensure the highest level of fairness, non-discrimination, openness, and transparency. ESD staff has determined that approval of the proposed 2024 guidelines does not constitute an action as defined by the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act and its implementing regulations. At this time, no further environmental review is required in connection with this requested approval. The directors are requested to adopt the proposed 2024 guidelines for the use, awarding, monitoring, and reporting of procurement contracts. Based on the foregoing, I recommend approval of the requested actions.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions or comments relative to guidelines? Second.
I have a question.
One question.
Could you just share with us, I know it's in here, when and how entities get on the New York State preferred source list, which does not require a competitive bid. It's on page 5.
You get on the list on the preferred source.
It talks about it not requiring a
See if I
competitive
can answer
bid.
that. It's very limited. It's like Corecraft, Department of Corrections that makes it. It's vested. It's state, it's
Oh, okay,
state
within the
determines it,
state.
but it's very small.
Okay,
For the record, that was Steve Gollick.
thank you, Steve.
Welcome.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Other
And
questions?
I'll second the motion.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Bruce? Thank you very much for that. Next. Next, I want to Steve provide his presence report. This does not require a vote. It's for our information only. So, Steve.
Thanks, Bob. Debbie, we're ready. At this time, we have a short time-lapse video of the construction out at the site to give you approximately an 8-month window as to what's been happening out there. I thought it was the best way to show everybody what's been going on. Not everyone's had a chance to get out there yet. Recently. So again, this takes us back all the way to the groundbreaking ceremony, which was held on June 5th last year. Work began later that month. The project is currently on schedule for a 2026 opening. And some of the key milestones include the excavation, which you just saw there was really completed back in mid-October with a celebration of the bottoming out worker appreciation ceremony for everyone out there. So far, there's been about 5,000 cubic yards of material that have been removed and stored on site on the far side or the west side of ECC South. And some foundation excavation continues down in the hole. There's that one big snow right there real fast. Foundations continue, are about 70% complete. A total of 18,000 yards of concrete will be arriving throughout the course of the project. We actually expect most of that concrete work to be wrapped up in April and May. And right now, just what finished there with the cranes in the sky, we had the governor and others out on January 26th for a beam signing. Steel work began just a few days later on February 2nd. And we'll be putting in 24,000 tons of steel for the entire project. As of the end of last week, where they're currently in that video, they're currently working on tier 1 and 2, the lower tiers inside the bowl. Just about 800 pieces of the 10,000 necessary for those 2 tiers, for about 8% of the first part of the steel is going in. In addition to that, metal decking is being installed. Precast concrete has also been coming out to the site. And in a few short weeks, we'll actually have a 4th crane delivered out to the site. And you obviously can see those cranes in the sky. Steel work will continue well throughout, I should say, 24 and even into the beginning of 2025. So as I mentioned early on, project is on schedule. In terms of just overall contracting to bring everybody up to speed where we stand, we do have about $950 million worth of contracts which have been awarded by the bills. This includes work on the design, the engineering, all of the soft costs, as well, obviously, as construction. 27 construction awards have been given out to date. Currently, there are another 20 bids under review. And just recently, the bills advertised an additional 14 packages. As of the end of last month, we have nearly 70 local regional firms involved in the project as well. There are 41 minority women and business enterprise, as well as service disabled veteran businesses included in the project. Those are the certified firms. There are also 27 non-certified firms working on the project. And certainly we expect those to increase with the additional bids that's come in over time.
And that's a local,
Yeah, local,
Western New York.
to be clear, yeah, these are the regional firms. I know in the CBA, it's referred to as regional, and that's reaches more or less 8 counties all the way up to Monroe and Rochester.
But the 41 and the 27, the 41 subcontractors and the 27 non-certified, is that a number for total engaged or is that a number for regional engaged?
That is the total regional engaged to date.
Okay,
Yes,
okay.
yes. And obviously, in addition, a number of union workers are out on site, from the Teamsters and carpenters, laborers, masons, electricians, plumbers, steam fitters, operating engineers, and certainly now the iron workers. In terms of the MWBE SDVOB goals, the state sent a letter to the bills back in June, just a short while after the project got going. And at that time, the utilization rates were lower than we all wanted to see. Since that time, the bills, as well as their consultants and their contractors, have really made a stronger effort, I think, to increase those rates. And around, earlier this year, I should say, the state and the county took a second look at where those numbers were. After bid releases number 1 and 2, the bills are putting out a number of packages in releases. So we took another look after bid release 2 was complete, versus our first look, which was after bid release 1. So just looking at it in chunks. But anyway, the MBE, which our goal is 15%. The bills at the time were at 17.4% on the MBE. So they're actually exceeding the goal. We took a look here a few months ago. On the WBE side, again, with a goal of 15%, they're currently at 8.4%, so below the goal. And on the service disabled side, the goal is 6%. The project is currently at 3.1%. So I want everyone to be aware of the numbers, where they stand, and to let everybody know that both the state and the county continue to work with the bills and their team. And again, they have a lot of contracts under negotiation, out advertised, and some futures to come. So we'll continue to work with everybody to ensure that we get those numbers as high as possible.
Steve, can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
So this is what I was told, that if, say it's a bid, you have to have 15% MBE, 15% WBE, and 6% service disabled. Well, like, say like with the fireproofing, I could do 30% MBE, I don't have any WBEs, but they say, no, you still have to have 15, 15, 6. It goes by each contract. But there could be a WBE who could do 30% of another job with no MBEs. It doesn't make, it's not like the average overall, it's each contract. It doesn't make sense.
Right. Well, our contract with the bills, the state's agreement with the bills, is the project total, right? So we're looking at the end of the day, when all these individual bids add up, all the individual consulting contracts, right? All those miscellaneous pieces and parts come together. We would like to see at least 15, 15, and 6.
Total, right?
So it's overall.
Total.
Yeah.
That's not what
Overall,
they're saying. That's not what they're saying.
I think that the contractor, Gilbane Turner, is pushing hard to try and get 15, 15, and 6 at least on every contract. And that's probably what you're hearing. I mean, they're making a concerted effort to do that.
I mean, yeah, we meet every 2 weeks.
Right, but you are right. Not every contract has come in that way, and they are managing the expectations of the overall project coming in there.
Well, yeah, I know, because I've maybe, because I've been around forever, I've done maybe 100 project labor agreements, and this is the first one I've ever seen like that, and we've never missed a goal yet,
I think we'll get there overall as well. We can talk about that more, but I think they're aware that the goal is on the total project and not per individual.
Which makes more sense.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry,
Go ahead, you please.
well, if what Paul is saying is a preference of the general contractor, not necessarily identified language in the construction coordinating agreement or the project labor agreement, the general contractor can adjust and allow for like a local prime who might have more engagement with subs that are women and not women, service disabled veteran, and a minority. Because I think the biggest goal here is to get as many local subs and as many local primes engaged as possible. And if local primes are not being considered because they don't have 15-15-6, that's not really a requirement. That's just a preference to help us reach the overall goal.
Yeah, I think you can see it where the bills stand again, after bid release 1 and 2 have come in to be at 17.4% M, 8.4 W, right? They're clearly not bringing everything in at 15 and 15. So they're doing their best to date, but I do think that sometimes it's stronger M or stronger W. SD has been trailing along the way, but I know they're focused on it. But they do have some flexibility contract by contract because overall, like I said, it's based on the total project cost of 1.5 billion.
Another problem we're getting is the state is clamping down on these guys. I mean, 34 group got disqualified.
Well, they remain on the list. A lot of firms, when they go through recertification, as 34 group did, they continue to be in the appeals process. So I don't want to say if ultimately where that lands.
WBEs are getting whacked all over the place.
There's definitely been a closer look at the recertifications this time around.
That's probably why they're lower.
I think it's reflective of, I think it's reflective of the bids that have gone out, frankly, to date, right, and the firms that are available. So certainly our hope is that as time goes on and additional packages are put out there, that we'll see the WBE rise as well.
See the other question, actually. Brendan?
No, I like the fact that there is a distinctive breakout of 15-15 and 6 respectively. But I do agree with both Paul and our legislative chair, April Baskin, that it needs to be expressed and understood that it's overall, because as you said, you could have a negative impact if people are being disqualified because you've reached that goal for this particular bid. And we don't want that to happen. I do believe that they need to monitor and manage so that the overall goals are achieved in each respective category. Because I think they're representative of different populations, and that's what we want to see. Both minorities, women, and disabled participating. So I concur with them. So,
Thank you.
Question I got there really for all 3 directors following up on her points, which are all great. And the contract specific allocations, if you can't hit the numbers for MBE or WB, what have the trends been? Could they try to go, I guess, more in a category, or is it left up to the construction leaders to pick? I just thought great points made. You could,
Sure.
some you could go higher on the MBEs for a project, and then maybe a different project higher than WBEs. But in the end, we know totality is what we're rated. But just wondering what their trends are contract to contract when they face these number issues, what they tend to do.
Yeah, well, again, the agreement states there to make good faith efforts to get to these goals that are set, right? The 15, 15, and 6. At the time that the state put out the first letter in June of last year, they were at 2.3% MBE compared to now, again, when we looked at them just a few months ago, up to 17.4%. Women was 4.1, now it's 8.4. SDVOB was 0.2, it's now 3.1. So again, I think they've made significant efforts, improvements, both in the outreach to getting folks there, getting people involved. And I think what you're hearing in some of, when we know some of these contractors involved in those meetings, they are strongly pushing to see 15, 15, and 6. That's the message. And I think that's why the results are higher now.
So we have lost work because they had enough MBE participation. They didn't have enough WBE, so they went out of town and got them. And they cut the MBE down so they could make, they think it's every contract. but there's a lot more WBEs who hang drywall than there are who fireproof, you know?
Right.
So they would make it up somewhere, but that's what they're doing. They're insisting that they have to have 15, 15, 6.
Well, I'll certainly go back and work that through with them. And if you have specifics, I'll talk to you after.
Oh, yeah.
Specific contracts.
I don't want to drag this out, but it seems to me since they're drawing from a list of certified MWBEs, and I'm going to keep them separate, women and minorities and disabled, service disabled. They know the scope of eligible potential contractors and subs. The planning process that they should be doing should align with their bid process. If they see a shortage in one area, then they should be looking to see if in the next area, they're going to be able to select from that pool. And I don't know how it breaks out by scope of work, but certainly it can be potentially managed. And you already know you don't have, as Paul said, any fireproofers. So then in your next process, you're going to really try to hone in, and maybe you deliberately go over in a particular category, because again, it's a balancing and management type of proposition, but the pool is the pool,
Yes.
and people can be added to the pool or prepared from the pool, but certainly they know what the pool looks like. And so they're going to have to do some real hard work to get to that balance.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad you're keeping their eye on it by having.
Turner knows how to do it. They've done a million PLAs. Well, I don't know where but this guy is insisting on that.
So well, they have developed what they're referring to as a roadmap for the entire project, looking again at all these different categories, whether it's design, soft costs, and then certainly the construction costs, general conditions, requirements, things like that. And they have tried to anticipate dollar amounts on those contracts. Certainly, they need to know the overall cost where they're going. But in addition to that, they're trying to estimate where the MW, SWB percentages will come in. And yes, sometimes they could be zero, depending on the item, and other times they're going to be higher. So they are looking at it in totality and trying to manage that. Again, I just think they are pushing bid by bid. They're trying to push those.
It shouldn't be at the.
It should not be at the expense of.
At the expense of losing work it costs.
Absolutely.
They just need to make it up somewhere.
I think this is a good place to transition to talk about how consultants are counted or could be counted or at least notated, because something that I'm really excited that we're able to do with this project is exceed the requirements of workforce and subcontracting and have the ability to include professional services, especially local professional services, as an attempt to include the local community as much as possible. And I know that ESD has some local engineering firms that they are using, and these engineering firms may be minority owned, they may be women owned, and that matters. Whether or not it counts towards 15A is one thing, but it matters in terms of our moral compass on making sure that we are reinvesting into local professionals the way that we should with this public dollar investment. So my question is, if Gilbane and Turner are using professional consultants, compliance consultants, engineering consultants, anybody else that is local, is there a mechanism that we can put in place to track their utilization of local folks versus out-of-town folks as well?
Right. So first of all of the design contracts, things like that, right? Consultants, if you will, are being tracked as part of the overall percentage.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I just want to make the distinction that the 15A program is a New York State certification.
Got it.
So what can happen is, and has happened from time to time on this job, is that there are qualified M's and W's from downstate, out of the local or even regional area, that are a part of these teams.
Got it.
But they are certainly still part of the M, right? W and SWB definition and count towards those ultimately those goals. But there are a number of local firms on the consulting side, certainly that are involved. And I did the numbers I gave you for the local teams are really more on the construction side.
Right.
But I can bring those back to you in terms of on the consulting
I
side.
think that's important.
Yeah, how
Yeah.
many MWBEs as well as if they're local regions.
I think that's
I'll
important.
bring that back.
Yeah.
I'd like to see a list of that, your numbers are derived from, but just to be aware of what the names of the companies who make up that percentage, whether it be, you gave numbers of participants, but then you also gave the percent of resources being spent pursuant to the goals.
You'd like
And
to
the
see a
agreement.
list of
I'd
those
like to
actual
see
companies
those, yeah.
involved.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
You can provide those.
Yes.
Yeah, Turner has that. They provided it to
Yeah,
my
they do.
office.
Right,
Yeah, yeah,
right.
they gave that to me.
Right, and I added to that was the 41 that
Mhm.
Turner had provided, but in addition, there are not some non-certified local
Yeah.
regional
You
firms.
That's
wanna-
important.
That's what I'm
We
saying.
wanna know that. And we
Exactly.
wanna know any local consultants
Okay,
that fall within these populations of being service disabled veterans, women, or minorities.
I'll follow up with
Yeah.
that information.
That would be great,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
that'd be good.
Anything on this side? Anything?
Doing great. You have one.
Don't sting us together. We're not sending notes under the table.
Paul started it.
Should be a cross partner. I would
We're on the same
recommend,
page.
with the suggestions here, maybe Steve's the best person to go back to, Turner.
Yeah.
I think the areas where you
You ought
can't,
to go back.
you can't get a certain number, as opposed to going outside the area, but maybe going higher here for one, catching up on a different project. I think that point was made, which I think is important, to keep as much the jobs here, but I think Steve is in a great position to go back and just carry the sentiments of the directors back.
Absolutely. Good.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
You're doing a
Thank you.
great job.
Thank you.
I would want
That's
your
it. That's
job.
all I got.
I want that job.
That's why you didn't put it in writing.
That's it. All set.
Any
Yeah.
questions on the report at all? I want to thank, actually, I want to thank Steve for his work.
Yes,
I think
yes,
it's-
yes.
I think Chair Best said, it's not an easy job,
No.
it's a tough job, but
Right.
I just appreciate the work you do with the directors. I think the project is going great. For those that went to the signing ceremony to see hundreds of happy workers there, men and women work, was a great thing. That's what it's all about. That's the bills, but also people that are really gaining economic from this project. So we appreciate all that. If there's any further business or just, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Oh,
We just want to thank our friends at the county for their support and help as well.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Always. Motion to adjourn.
Motion made.
We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bob, when you give construction workers free lunch.